very different perspective from here. I like it. Well, good afternoon again, council members, Chair Lee, Speaker Menon, members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the mayor's preliminary budget and financial plan. I'm pleased to be joined today by Executive Deputy Comptroller for Budget and Finance, Francesco Brindisi, and Deputy Comptroller for Budget, Krista Olson. Council members, I had the pleasure of sitting where you are for 8 years and of following the budget closely for the 4 years since. And I can tell you that in all that time, I and we have never seen a fiscal challenge as big as the one we face now. We know that in part because Mayor Mamdani and his administration have provided the most honest and transparent accounting of the budget we have seen in years. The mayor's budget proposal accurately acknowledges billions in costs that in years past were routinely under budgeted.
Oh wait, sorry, one quick question.
No problem.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you have copies of the?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know.
Sorry, just a logistics question.
I think we do, but.
Yeah, Chris.
I love it. It's from a place of love.
Okay. We had budget cuts in the comptroller's office.
Yes, I know. Savings
Efficiency
plan.
savings
plan,
already.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I
All
didn't
right,
mean to
that's
interrupt.
$12 off our budget gap right there.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Can I continue?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks to the mayor's transparency, we have the clearest view yet of where New York City stands fiscally. And here's what we see. New York City is quite simply spending more than it takes in. So now we're confronted with a choice. Do we begin addressing this imbalance now and put the city on a stronger, more sustainable fiscal path? Or do we kick the can into next year and leave ourselves vulnerable at a moment of deep economic uncertainty? I want to take a moment to address a simple question. If the economy is strong, why is our budget so out of whack? New York City's economy grew by a healthy pace last year, with real wage income rising by nearly 3%. Wall Street bonuses are higher this season than any year in history. And every major source of city tax revenue, apart from corporate taxes, is rising. Personal income tax, real property taxes, and sales taxes. Unfortunately, our expenses are growing even faster, which we now see clearly thanks to the mayor's transparency. For example, rental assistance costs, mainly our housing voucher program, City FEPS, an essential lifeline for tens of thousands of families, has been growing at 4% per month and is projected by my office to reach $2.6 billion next year. For perspective, this is larger than the entire annual expense budget of HPD. The cost of special education due process claims, also known as Carter cases, is expected to reach $1.5 billion next year, tripling since fiscal year 2019. Our education budget overall now totals $36.9 billion, up 31.5% since 2020, even as school enrollment has fallen by 100,000 students during that time. These are just a few examples of rapidly growing expenses. Because the mayor's preliminary budget now reflects these costs, it projects total spending of $127 billion in the coming fiscal year, an increase of $5.5 billion over last year. To balance the budget, despite the rapid growth in expenses, the administration relies on a variety of measures, including 4 that I want to highlight: optimistic revenue projections, drawing down reserves, reduced prepaid expenses, and raising property tax levy close to the constitutional limit. Each of these steps deserves scrutiny because each comes with its own set of fiscal risks. First, the mayor's revenue projection. His plan increases the baseline tax estimate by $4.1 million for FY27 compared to the November plan. Even the mayor himself has called this projection, quote, aggressive. In fact, the new revenue estimates my office has released today, you can see it in this book here, also available online, we show revenue coming in at $1.8 billion lower than the mayor's projections for FY26 and 27. How is it that OMB got such a high revenue estimate? They did that by assuming that the bull market that fueled the financial industry in 2024 and 2025 continues in 2026, in what OMB refers to as another, quote, exceptional year. In their scenario, the securities industry would add 8,200 jobs over the next 2 years, triple what my office projects, with total financial industry wages growing by nearly twice what my office projects. Then there's the draining of reserves. The mayor's plan takes $2.6 billion from reserves over FY26 and 27, drawing from the Revenue Stabilization Fund, the city's Rainy Day Fund, the Retirees Health Benefits Trust, as well as the in-budget reserves for next year. These reserves exist to protect the city during economic downturns or against federal cuts and unexpected shocks. Drawing them down now, when revenues are at record level, reduces our ability to respond when the next crisis actually arrives. The mayor's plan also draws down prepaid expenses, a step that has received little attention but warrants a closer look. For decades, rolling over prepaid expenses has been an important fiscal tool, allowing the city to carry operating surplus forward to the following year. In FY25, the city carried $3.8 billion in prepaid expenses. But under the mayor's plan, that drops to just $238 million for FY26, a 94% decline. While the mayor's proposal is technically in balance for FY26, when we account for both the reduced operating surplus and the rainy day fund drawdown, the plan indicates that operating expenses this year will actually exceed revenues by $4.5 billion. And then there's the mayor's proposal to raise property taxes. Our current property tax system is profoundly unequal, with the brownstone owner in Park Slope paying a much lower rate than a brownstone owner in East New York, among many other inequities and inconsistencies across the city. Raising property tax rates would simply compound the harm done by an already unfair system, while simultaneously exacerbating our housing affordability crisis. For this reason alone, I strongly oppose raising them. But there's another concern that you might not be aware of. Raising rates 9.5%, as the mayor has proposed, brings us just short of the constitutional limit for our property taxes, which would mean we have little room to maneuver should we face an economic crisis in the future. And just what are the chances of an economic crisis ahead for New York City? While both the U.S. and New York City economies showed some resilience in 2025, the recovery has been uneven. Outside the single sector of healthcare, specifically home health aides, New York City's private sector employment actually declined over the past year by 38,000 jobs. And looking ahead, the uncertainties are growing. The most immediate risk to the economy now is geopolitical. The recent strikes on Iran and the expanding conflict there have already rattled financial markets and driven up oil prices. If disruptions to energy supply or global shipping intensify, the resulting inflation and market volatility could weaken economic growth. Other risks are emerging as well. Rapid advances in artificial intelligence may become labor substituting, reducing demand for some of the core occupations that anchor New York City's economy. At the same time, if AI-driven gains in productivity and profitability arrive more slowly or prove more limited than markets currently anticipate, the downside risk to asset prices could be significant. Additional uncertainties include a potential resurgence of inflation, continued volatility around tariffs, and the prospect of more widespread deportations under Trump's draconian policies. All of these economic risks could challenge the optimistic assumptions built into the mayor's financial plan. And if the economy underperforms these projections, the city will have far less in reserves to absorb the shock. Taken together, The strategies used to balance this budget, aggressive revenue assumptions, driving down reserves, reducing prepaid expenses, and raising the property tax levy close to its limit, shift fiscal risk into the future. If the economy performs exactly as the mayor has projected, the plan will hold. But if revenues fall short, the city could face sudden budget gaps at a time when our reserves and fiscal flexibility have already been reduced. It will take the efforts of every player in local government, all of us, to achieve a budget that avoids these risks. We will need more help from Albany in the form of more equal funding formulas and potentially new revenue streams. We will need to find a way to slow the growth of rapidly rising city expenses. We'll need to find greater efficiencies and savings in every city agency. And given that the current budget plan relies heavily on the assumption that New York City's economy overall, and specifically the financial sector, will continue to thrive here, we must also do more to slow the departure of jobs to Texas and other parts of the nation. None of this will be easy. Every step we need to take will be politically challenging. But the alternative is to pass a budget in June which pushes the risk off into the year ahead, at a moment when both our fiscal outlook and our economic competitiveness face growing uncertainty. Despite the challenges of this moment, I am confident we will get through this. New York City has the most dynamic and diverse economy in America. We have the most talented and creative workforce anywhere in the nation. And we are a global capital of everything from finance to fashion, from technology to the arts. If we do the hard work now to build a smarter and more sustainable budget, I have no doubt that our city will emerge from this moment stronger and more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comptroller. So I'm just going to dive right into some questions before I pass it along to my colleagues. So just talking about underspending a little bit. On January 28th, the mayor made an unusual announcement that the budget he inherited faced a $12 billion shortfall in key areas, largely related to social services. And to make the point, he cited in part analysis from your office calling out the under-budgeting. Then on February 17th, he released his preliminary budget that addressed these shortfalls. And this morning, as you mentioned, the report showing that the expense budget still underestimates spending needs by $1.4 billion across fiscal years 26 and 27. So can you explain why you still see underspending in the budget? And is it that the administration didn't fully reflect the full underspending need, or have your cost estimates changed? If you could give us a sense of that.
Now look, we have a gap because we have a systemic imbalance between what we spend and what we bring in. And that is the challenge that we are all facing in this budget process. And we put a number on it in January, at $12 billion between this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And to the mayor's enormous credit, he embraced it, and he presented a preliminary budget that gives a fair accounting of expenses in a way that we haven't seen in years. So he put it in stark terms. And we've had some good news since January. We had the best Wall Street bonus season that we've ever had, and that allowed us to revise our revenue projections up. We also got an already announced additional assistance from the governor of about $1.5 billion. And the mayor has announced a plan to secure some efficiencies that details of which will be announced on May 20th to the tune of about $1.7 billion. So we've made various measures to close that gap down. The rest of it, though, is largely still there. And it's closed by drawing down on prepaid expenses this year, by drawing from our reserves, by adding in a property tax. And I can add some new details in the report we put out today. We've done an updated analysis. What I announced in January is obviously a little outdated. And we believe that we're coming in with revenue projections that are a little bit less aggressive than the mayor. Again, the mayor's assuming Wall Street keeps booming at the current pace, which could happen, and I hope it happens. But we're being a little more cautious, and that difference there is part of the gap that we see remaining.
Okay. And then the re-estimates that you gave in your budget analysis, so as you mentioned, the revenue expenses, there's a $3.6 billion gap for fiscal year 26 and 27. And this gap includes the assumption of the proposed property tax increases, which you just mentioned. Without the increase, the gap would be 7.3, right? It would actually be higher in your estimates. So based on this analysis and the testimony you gave, so does this still mean you believe the property tax, the property increase is necessary?
Yeah, we wanted to put on the table every challenge we have to overcome. And so we have a little bit of more cautious revenue projection, and that I think is about 1.8 billion difference between this and next fiscal year. We actually did identify some expenses we think the mayor is still undercounting. This is nothing like the systemic under-budgeting of years past, but in a couple of areas I can talk about, there's a little bit, we believe, of underestimating expenses. Like the council, I appreciated your statement of objecting to the drawdown of reserve funds. And then lastly, there is the property tax increase, which we all agree we'd rather avoid. That together leaves us with about $7 billion of work that we have to focus on together to find savings or new revenues to plug those holes.
Okay, great. And so how do you propose, sort of digging a little deeper, the city address those additional shortfalls that exist? Is it reserves, other tax increases, service cuts? And then what happens in the scenario that the state doesn't approve the additional tax increases?
Look, I don't think we should be drawing down reserves at a time when the economy is growing and tax revenue is increasing. The rainy day fund exists for tough times, for a recession or some kind of shock we're not expecting, such as, God forbid, a pandemic or some major shock. None of that applies right now. This isn't a rainy day by any definition. This should not be the circumstances under which we draw down from the fund. So I join you, Chair Lee, in opposing that. What do we do? We're going to need progress on a lot of fronts. We're going to need help from Albany. We send more money to Albany every year than we get back. By far, we're an economic engine for New York State, and we don't get our fair share of a variety of programs that have funding formulas that disadvantage us, and that should be fixed. And I'll give you one example. Aid to Independent Municipalities, known as AIM. We don't get any money. Other municipalities do. If we got what they get on a per capita basis, our analysis shows we'd get $2 billion a year. That's just one example of a way that we're not getting our fair share. We're going to need more help on that. I know we have a lot of friends in Albany fighting for that, and I hope we do. We're going to need to find more efficiencies. The mayor's made a good first step in the plan that he's reporting out on March 20th. I think we're going to have to go farther. And the next step will be a little bit tougher. But I just don't see that we have a choice right now. And then we're going to have to curb some of the fast-growing expenses. I laid them out. This is the most difficult thing any of us are going to have to take on because it touches vital programs. But I think we can do it in smart, tactical ways that slow the growth without removing benefits that anyone currently depends on. If we do all that, I think we can get there. It won't be easy. This is a heavy lift, but I'm here today to give the message that we have to do this work over the next 3 months.
Definitely, and totally agree. We need to do the work together on this because it takes a village. And you and I were both up in Albany for Tin Cup Day, and we were all advocating for help, especially with AIM, because we did used to receive that funding and are no longer receiving it.
Yeah.
So I know that, have you also looked at identifying areas where there might be over budgeting, where the city may see accruals? So I know typically there have been savings that occur every year, like debt service savings, which averages about $300 million annually. And so just wanting to know if there was any analysis for areas for over budgeting as well.
Yes, of course. We look hard for this. And I think our honest analysis is that they're pretty minimal, that there isn't much to add back in there. The debt savings you referenced, this is a fairly technical topic, and it does depend to some extent on market forces beyond our control, and might in some years depend on a refinancing. But it's hard to see how we could justify adding in a significant amount of money to our budget this year based on those kinds of savings. I think in terms of accruals and current vacancies, I'll tell council members we have a wonderful dashboard on the comptroller's website where you can see the vacancies for any agency and in total across city government. But not all of them are still budgeted for, and at any rate, we're fairly late in the fiscal year. And there also are some staff lines that are non-salary, like per diem for teachers at DOE. So I don't think there's a massive amount of accrual to recoup here, maybe in the order of a few $100 million. But I think basically on the expense side, that the mayor's pretty close.
Okay, because that was actually, you perfectly segued into my next question about the accruals, because I know that typically, you know, I think as of now, the current estimate is approximately 14,000 vacancies for the full-time positions. And so I just wanted to know, because also IBO right before us was saying that they're projecting about 681 million, but that's without the fringe costs. So I just wanted to know, I mean, and we're sort of looking at similar numbers, and just wanted to know where your office stands in terms of doing the analysis with the vacancies as well as the fringe costs.
I'm going to say a word on the big picture, and then I'm going to pass it to our deputy comptroller for budget. You cited the top line. I think there's also going to be some reasons that will mitigate against that, including the non-salaried staff, as I mentioned, like per diem in the Department of Ed. So I think our net cost is probably more in the $300 million range, but I'm going to pass it to Deputy Comptroller Olson to elucidate us.
Hi. Yes, and we've done some analyses. A lot depends on how they implement the hiring freeze. We've made some assumptions based on what we know, and we do get to about $300 million. It includes non-healthcare fringe, but we do see it being largely offset by the unsalaried costs, and so we have not included an offset. In addition, because we assume for most of our gap estimates that they will achieve the savings, it would expect that to be already embedded in their savings calculation, so we're not adding anything on top. And then, as the comptroller mentioned, we see that some of the authorized headcount is not fully budgeted, and have some concerns about fully valuing all of the vacancies that they may reduce.
Okay. And sorry, I'm just jumping around a little bit, but going back to the historical under-budgeting, which I agree, I think it's good that the mayor's side is seeking to present a much more accurate estimate of what the city's actual expenses are. So in that sense, it's great. And for the city's budgeting, you know, if the process requires that while costs may be underestimated during the year, they must be accurately reflected by the time fiscal year comes to a close. And so even during years when expenses had been under budgeted, the city was still able to cover the under budgeted costs without having to dip into the reserves or initiate large tax increases. So so what do you think is inherently different this year, which I know you sort of alluded to, where correctly recognizing the actual cost of these items would necessitate such drastic steps that were not required in previous years?
It's a very astute question, Madam Chair. How the heck did we get away with this for so long? And I think the answer is two things. One, that we continue to benefit from a very strong economy and a very strong financial sector, that we're on year 16 of a bull run on Wall Street. And so we kept meeting or exceeding our revenue targets. And that was kind of the typical pattern. We'd spend more than we thought, but a little more would come in on revenue. But in the last couple of years, even that wasn't enough. And we started to have to use one-shot measures to make the numbers balance. And I talked about one of the biggest, which I don't think we talk enough about, which is prepaid expenses, which we were able to roll over $6 billion plus in prepaid expenses when we were getting a lot of COVID money in. And that was chipped away until last year. It was 3.8, I think, and that's now collapsing this year. So those one-shot deals, they're called one-shots for a reason. Eventually you run out. And we're pretty close to running out. So it is time to be honest about these challenges and to deal with what is pretty clearly now a systemic imbalance.
No, I agree. And do you think that this could be sort of an indication that, I mean, obviously we still have a lot of work to do in right-sizing the budget to reflect the actual need. And so, but this time on the side of reducing the over-budgeted areas, what are your thoughts on that piece of it too?
On how do we reduce now?
Yeah. Well, because this is sort of an indication, we're trying to right-size it.
Right.
So then but this time it's on the side of reducing the over-budgeted areas, and so I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Look, this is tough.
Yeah.
We're going to have to work on this together. I've identified 3 or 4 very fast-growing programs. I talked about our Department of Ed budget, which has grown steadily year after year at a time when enrollment is dropping. We're down 100,000 since 2020, and probably down 200,000 if you go farther back. We have had a steady increase in these special ed Carter cases, tripled in the last 3 years. It's hitting 1.5 billion. This body has worked well at looking at increases in overtime costs and more. And there are trade-offs in every one of those program areas. And I think we're just going to have to work together now to right-size them, or we wait and then we're in a real crisis. And the people who will pay the cost for that are the most vulnerable in the city, and I don't want it to come to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to go towards asking about receivables and payables, because especially this is an area I know that some folks are focused on, especially when we're trying to think through how do we get some of the revenue back into the budget. But the preliminary plan recognizes 500 million in savings by re-estimating prior year payables. And these are expenditures we had appropriated for in prior years that the city now believes it will not have to pay. And I think your office is engaged in the determination of how much can be written off. And so just out of curiosity, can you speak about what role the office plays in making this determination of what to write off? What's the criteria? How does that happen?
Okay, I'm going to pass it to the Executive Deputy Comptroller in a moment. I just want to say a big picture that obviously we want to collect everything we can, right? That's the first thing you do. Before you raise taxes, you want to collect what's already owed. And the mayor's proposed hiring more tax auditors, which seems to me a pretty prudent strategy to do that. You probably will recoup more than you spend on the salaries. On the other hand, the mayor's announced that he does not intend to go forward with a lien sale, which is the way that we recoup property taxes, money owed to the Department of Finance and for water bills. And look, I understand the policy motivation there because it can often fall on low-income homeowners and people who are struggling in communities of color. But I just want to put that on the table as working against the idea of collecting more. And in general, look, a lot of what we don't collect is from defunct businesses or entities where it's going to be hard. So I'd caution you on over-exuberance on that. But you asked a very good question about our role in making the estimates, and I'm going to pass it to the executive deputy for that.
Just my favorite topic. I brought a prop, which is our comprehensive financial report.
Oh, you could really hurt someone with that thing.
Anyway, so the Office of the Comptroller, the Bureau of Accountancy, works with agencies throughout the year, and especially towards the end of the fiscal year when we close the books on the fiscal year, in making sure that they review the appropriateness of all of their payables and receivables. The mayor's office essentially every year puts 400 to 500 million routinely in this net changes in accruals, and then they are not specified. They're not identified yet. So all of those will be identified at the time of close. There are some details about what is done in our mighty Schedule G5 for payables, which you can download in a nice, tidy spreadsheet, so you can see which agencies take down more. And it's, you know, it's a big complicated process that happens towards the end of the fiscal year where both these payables and receivables are looked at, and then we insist that agencies, you know, take down these accruals when it's necessary and warranted, and we work with OMB on that.
Great. And what types of payables constitute the majority of some of the reestimates that are in the budget?
There is a breakdown by agency, and as I mentioned, Schedule G5. If you go, I know everybody is excited about Schedule G5. It's on page 3,422 of the system. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be facetious. The last year there was a lot of takedown from the mayors from OMB, which are mostly FEMA expenses that were not incurred during COVID. There was a substantial write-down in payables from the Department of Homeless Services, in part because there was a double counting that we documented in our budget reports in 2023 for the expenses for asylum seekers. And there was about $500 million. So the mayors, I think, mayoralty was about $2 billion in takedown, in write-down in payables. Homeless service was about $700 million, and DOE was about $500 million. But I have to say that maybe giving a little bit of color to the answer that the comptroller had. You know, why are we now in this process, in this situation where the prepayment drops from 3.8 billion to 200 and something million? You know, the last year, the administration took very aggressive look at all of these accruals, let me put it this way. And so these accounting changes generated about $2 billion in resources that were used to close the gap. And so some of those, you know, actions are sort of have been taken and they're not available going forward. So that's in part why we're seeing now a more dire situation.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And do you have information on which agencies write off a higher share of their receivables? Is that broken down?
We'd be able to work with your staff to, you know, to work on those on that reporting.
Okay, I'd be curious to see how the agencies fall in those categories. And if you could also, can you provide a breakdown of how much and when the receivables are written off and by source of funds?
We'd be happy to work with you on that.
Okay. And while writing off prior year payables provides a savings for the city when recognized, writing off prior year receivables creates a cost, as costs that previously were assumed to be covered with non-city funds have to be backfilled by city funds. And so is your office also involved with doing this exercise as well?
Yeah, it's the same process. It happens at the same time, yes.
Okay. And can you provide a history of how much in prior year receivables have been written off by fiscal year? Do you have that?
Sure. With that, we'd be happy to give you that. A lot of there are ups and downs, and the mayoralty for the FEMA grants writes off quite a bit of them, of those receivables. And then social service agencies, ACS and DHS and DSS, they are typically the largest contributors to those write-downs.
Okay, great. And you kind of answered my next question, which agencies are the biggest drivers of those write-offs?
It's a lot of TANF money. But we'd be happy to work with you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm just going to quickly follow up on the City FEPS estimates, because I think the estimates for City FEPS costs are higher than what is in the budget and what we're seeing. And so can you please walk us through the calculations and assumptions on that?
Yeah, I think I'll pass it to you, Crystal, but I think it's pretty close. This was the biggest area of under budgeting under the prior administration by billions of dollars, actually. And I think our gap is fairly limited. Krista, do you want to outline? Yeah.
Yes, so they added a considerable amount in the February plan, and we see this year as being, we expect if the growth continues as it has historically, that the year will close to what they have also estimated. However, if we continue that level of growth but slow it down and basically take half of that growth and apply a 1.9% growth, we get a slightly higher estimate and believe that they would need about $300 million more. and then that kind of continues in the out year. We would expect about 300 million more per year, just based on what's in the plan and our applied kind of slower growth rate.
So 300 million more per year?
Yes.
Okay,
Beginning in 27,
okay.
than what they have, yeah.
Then what, oh, I see, then
Than
what they have.
yeah.
Okay,
And that's for the current program.
okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I have a bunch of other questions, but I'm going to actually move to our colleagues to ask questions as well. So first up, we have Majority Leader Abreu, followed by Majority Whip Hanks.
Hello, Mr. Comptroller. Thank you so much.
Majority Leader, good to see you.
Thank you so much for showing up. Are you worried about our bond rating, and what are the rating agencies saying?
That is a very important question, Majority Leader. Bond agencies look very closely at how we handle our reserves, and they don't generally like it when you draw down on reserves in good years. And we actually got a report this week from one of the three principal rating agencies, S&P, and it's publicly available. Their language is very similar to ours. I think they have expressed concerns about this structural imbalance. We are awaiting word from the other two agencies, Moody's and Fitch. But I also want to say that we do not expect a downgrade in our actual rating, and that we have a bond sale next week that we're optimistic will be successful. So I want to reassure people that we are able to meet our borrowing needs. But we do want to pay attention to what the rating agencies are saying to us, because it's sort of an early warning. And if they begin to ask some tough questions or express concerns, I think that should force us to take all these challenges even more seriously. And the truth is, at least based on the first comments from S&P, we're getting that message already.
Thank you. And I'm going to just pivot to City of Yes. I know it's a topic area of interest to you for sure. Through the City Council's City for All initiative, $5 billion was added for housing and infrastructure investments to complement the rezoning passed in City of Yes for housing opportunity. Included in this was a $1 billion commitment for housing from New York State. However, all of the funds were reappropriated in state fiscal year 2027. Is your office monitoring City of Yes commitments and auditing the administration's delivery and ability to spend state funds?
I don't know if we have a formal audit underway on that, but I would love to join with you and the council to put that under a magnifying glass. I'm also worried that these dollars are fungible and being moved around, and you all negotiated a great deal, and we need to make sure it's spent in the community. So let's work together, and we'll put that under scrutiny for you.
Sounds great. And as you know, housing construction and preservation costs are increasing due to aging housing stock and rising costs. Do you have a plan? Are you planning on looking into any of these cost increases in the near term? And is there an estimate on how much housing construction costs will increase across the preliminary plan period?
I don't know if we built that in or not, but the costs are rising. I got a briefing on a project last week that's $850,000 per unit, affordable housing. And we're not going to meet our goals, our ambitious goals, unless we find a way to get those costs under control. City government is part of the problem. It just takes too long and it's too complicated to get approvals from HPD, from DOB, from FDNY. And this is an area that we are going to be aiming our audit tools on to find out what are these delays, which are adding time and cost to projects, affordable and market rate. If we don't get this under control, we're not going to meet our housing goals.
Thank you so much. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Great. Majority Whip Hanks?
Thank you so much for coming in your testimony. Comptroller Levine, it's really good to see you.
Thank you, Majority Whip.
So firstly, I want to applaud for your opening statement. I'm really glad I got a copy of it, because the things that you're saying here and the path forward and your conclusion, we absolutely, I do, agree with so many of the things you're saying. The New York City budget, New York State's budget, exceeds the state of Florida and has 3 times as many people. Yet people are now calling Florida, or the Sunshine State, New York City's 6th borough. At least they're doing it in Staten Island. And these are for really big reasons. It's the lower tax bracket, better quality of life, and and I have to ask these questions as my constituents are from Staten Island, outer boroughs. We often feel the brunt of some of the so-called solutions that that we're talking about here, like raising property taxes, or whether it's congestion pricing in the MTA, and we have this huge, huge gap. So so my big question is, are we exploring and looking at measurables and agencies and programs that can justify the spending that we're doing? Is the Comptroller's office coming up with a matrix to kind of ensure that we're getting the results from the spending? And I'd just love to hear your feedback on that. And it's something that I think the council should be working with the Comptroller in earnest on.
Absolutely, Majority Whip. Look, I've expressed concerns about the rate of growth of New York City's budget and the fact that we've got to get it lined up with the actual revenue coming in. I am going to defend us vis-a-vis Florida. And yes, we have decided that we want to spend on things like a public hospital system, which provides vital care for people in need in New York that Florida doesn't do. We have a right to shelter here to prevent people from sleeping on the street, which other cities don't offer. We invest a lot in law enforcement and policing, and we also have better public safety numbers than Florida, and certainly better than the big cities in Florida. So we've made a decision to have a strong local government, and we have results that show that that has made New York City a better place. We do still have a fiscal imbalance that we have to address, and I've put that out in the open, and there's going to be some tough decisions we have to make to close that gap, but I know we're up for it.
Well, I am a New Yorker, true born and raised, and so the question I asked is because I'm going to take that snippet and I'm going to play it, because these are the things that my constituents ask. Often the question is so I can get the answers that it's so, why it's so great to live in the best city in the world. One more question. FIFA World Cup tax revenue impact. The preliminary plan includes additional spending for World Cup totaling over $50 million in fiscals 2026, 2027, combined for security with additional $19.5 million in marketing expenses. Given these additional costs related to co-hosting the World Cup events, is it important to understand the local tax revenue impact the event on the city? And has your office kind of done an estimation on the projected tax revenue impact of the World Cup?
Yes, we have. And I'm very excited for the World Cup, and I'm excited for the economic impact.
Me too, again.
Thank you, Chair Maloney, for highlighting that. But the truth is that the economic impact is spread around the region, so it's not only in New York City. And all the economic impact is not dollars into our coffers. So we're estimating about $50 million in incoming additional revenue, which is significant, but it wouldn't quite cover the total expenditures we expect to occur. I think that's okay because there's a lot of economic vitality that this event will bring about and other good reasons to hold it. But on net, again, I think we expect about a $50 million bump up in revenue and costs that maybe are around 70 or 80 million if I'm in the right range there.
And you can't put a price tag on being cool.
That is true.
Thank you so much, Comptroller.
Thank you.
Great. Speaker?
Hi.
Hi,
I'm back.
Speaker.
Hello. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I know that a number of colleagues have asked a series of questions, and I know that they touched on city FEP. So I really want to start there. I wanted to get your comments on the city FEP situation and what do you think is the proper number in terms of coverage on city FEPs?
Yes, so Speaker, you're well aware of both how important the program is, because it's helping now 65,000 families remain in their home and avoid homelessness. And you're also aware of how fast it's growing, which is close to 4% a month. And when you compound that, it's really not sustainable. And by the way, that is before we consider what might be negotiated in the court,
Right.
which we did not account for, nor did the mayor in our projection. So that would be an additional rate of growth, which would be significant. Just to say for a moment, our office did do an analysis, and the original version of the expansion would add, at a minimum, $6 billion over 5 years, and potentially, because there's a lot of unknowns, on a high end, $20 billion. So what do we do about this? I don't think this is about throwing anyone off their voucher. I think people need that protection. It's just about asking, can we slow the rate of growth? And that could happen through a variety of measures. It could happen by changing some of the parameters. It also could happen by establishing a cap, an expenditure cap, essentially, which is how programs generally run. It's unusual for New York City to have essentially what's an entitlement, something like, I don't know, Social Security, right? There's no cap on Social Security. If you qualify, you get it. But by contrast, Section 8, which is sort of the federal twin to city FEPS, reaches a cap. And there's a downside to that because people wind up on a waiting list. But without that, well, we have $2.6 billion in costs next year and growing fast. So those are tough.
Yep.
Even to say that out loud is tough. I'm not minimizing it. But I know you're thinking seriously about it. I think together we have to come together and figure this out.
Exactly. We're thinking very seriously about this. We know this is a sustainability issue, and so we know we need to address it, and we know we need to address Carter cases. Any thoughts on Carter cases?
Yes, tripled in the last 3 years. And again, of course, we want to provide the best education for kids with learning challenges. The obvious solution is to have better programming inside the schools. What's happening here is children are diagnosed or even maybe unable to get a diagnosis, and they have no choice but to go to private schools. That shouldn't be the preferred option. The preferred option should be find a way to meet the needs of those kids inside the schools with better diagnosis and better services. So this is a programming question. I believe we could spend a little more on those services inside the schools and save much more than we would have spent in the privates.
The next area I want to go to is a topic that, as you know, I'm very passionate about, is cracking down on no-bid contracts. So during the de Blasio administration, competitive bidding was suspended over 100 times to the tune of $7 billion, and the city overpaid for a lot of PPE. In the Adams administration, with the asylum seeker crisis, competitive bidding was suspended for over 18 months, and you saw numerous no-bid contracts like DocGo for $430 million. We've now passed legislation that is now, we passed it a couple weeks ago, that basically cracks down on this long-term use of no-bid contracts during emergencies. Under the legislation, which is my bill, it actually gives you, as a controller, and the Corp Counsel the authority to go beyond. It basically suspends long-term use of no-bid contract unless you and the Corp Counsel agree. So I guess my question is, I really believe we could save billions of dollars by cracking down on the long-term use of no-bid contracts. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that subject.
Well, yes, you want to be careful that you only apply these expedited rules when there's a real emergency, and that you only apply them for the duration of the actual emergency, and that, as you said, it doesn't extend beyond what's reasonable. And you put some time limits on there with some reasonable exceptions that we can apply. I don't think we've made an analysis on exactly how much that would save. It's something we can do. Perhaps the council has already done that, and we'd love to work together with you on that. But sure, as a concept, we want to make sure that we're only applying the emergency contracting rules when there's an emergency and only for the duration of the actual crisis.
And maybe you talked about this when I had stepped out, but in terms of savings in the budget, has your office identified additional savings in the budget that you feel that we should be focused on?
So we've looked at the fast-growing programs that we've mentioned with vouchers. We've looked at a variety of options in the education budget, which has grown very rapidly. Just to mention one important point, as we've lost enrollment, we now have 200 schools in New York City that have under 200 students. And that ends up adding a lot to the cost because you still have to have one of a variety of professional functions, even though you have fewer students. And you can save money by combining schools, which is tough. I keep saying these are all difficult because no one likes their school to be merged. But that is a way we could save significant money, and there's probably other savings inside the school system, which again has grown during a time of falling enrollment. And then while you were in the other meeting, I did comment on the need to probably go further on efficiencies. The mayor's made a first step. It's not calling them pegs, but it's what we used to call pegs. We're probably going to have to go further on that as well.
Okay, well, we greatly appreciate your testimony.
Thank you,
and
Speaker.
thank you so much for being here today, and I'll turn it back over to our chair.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, we have Deputy Speaker, followed by Councilmember Ressler.
I'll give my time to Councilmember Narcisse. I know she has to go. Thank you.
Bienvenue, le contrôleur.
Merci beaucoup.
Je suis très contente d'être ici.
Moi aussi.
Okay. Allons avec les questions. For the hospital, distress hospital, the governor announced an additional $1.5 billion in state resources to help New York City balance its budget. Part of the state assistance was the reversal of the distress hospital fund intercept. The state had been intercepting $150 million of the city's tax revenue annually for a fund to help distressed hospitals across the state. Do you believe that there are other New York City tax revenue intercepts that the city should advocate to reverse?
I want to credit again Governor Hochul, who about a month ago put on the table about $1.5 billion, $1.6 billion of additional funding for the city. And what you referenced was part of that package. And this is good news, but I'm going to refer to Deputy Comptroller Olson to go into more depth on that.
In terms of other tax revenue intercepts, the other major sales tax intercept is for online marketplace sales, and to our knowledge, it supports outstanding MTA bonds. The fiscal year 25 amount was $177 million, and it grows about 1% per year statutorily. However, because it is pledged to the MTA and supports MTA debt service, it would be complex to reverse.
Okay, and one of the things that you said that I'm very grateful to hear, the rainy day fund supposed to be for rainy days, like epidemic, pandemics, or anything that may happen. And especially nowadays, I think rainy day fund should be kept, close to our heart. Citywide vendors, you know about the nonprofits, right? The procurement and sourcing solutions portal, right, Passport, maintained by the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, is an electronic platform that manages, I don't have to go through all that with you, but we have serious problem with that, right? Does your office have any recommendation to improve the antiquated passport system to make it more efficient and user-friendly for the contractors?
Plus.
Really good question. Look, Passport was itself supposed to be the solution to upgrade from an older system.
But it's the problems that we're dealing with.
And there's a lot of frustration with it. We've been meeting with a group of nonprofit leaders on this very topic. I think the smaller nonprofits are especially frustrated with the usability issues. I think the larger nonprofits see Passport really more as the symptom, not the problem. That the problem is we don't pay nonprofits on time, and we have a very cumbersome bureaucratic process that Passport perhaps reflects. But look, more broadly speaking, I think we need to upgrade technology, and Passport is no longer state-of-the-art. And the question that we've been grappling with our nonprofit leaders is the pain of another platform transition worth it, or can we find ways to improve Passport within the existing system? We're still dialoguing with leaders on that. I would love your opinion now or in the future as well, Council Member.
We do need to pay those services, the nonprofit. They are really holding our structure together, but it's cumbersome to get pay. It's just so much going on. So I don't know, whatever you have, the brilliant idea you have to get no nonprofit pay in New York City, that would be a great deal. The World Cup, the money that we have here, let me see, it's including additional spending from the preliminary budget. $50 million for 2026 and 2027, combined for security, additional, which would need $19.5 million in marketing expenses, giving this additional cost related to co-hosting the World Cup event. It is important to understand the local tax revenue impact of the event on the city. Has your office estimated the projected tax revenue impact of the World Cup?
Yes, Councilman, I don't know if you were here. We talked about this. I'll just say very briefly. We did estimate that we would recoup an additional $50 million
50 million.
in revenue. That's direct to city government. Of course, there's a lot of economic activity beyond New York City and in the private sector, and that doesn't quite cover all our costs, which we put at, I think, about 70 million to 80 million.
Okay.
But it comes close.
All right. So thank you, and thank you, Madam Deputy, for giving me time. Thank you.
Sorry, and just wanted to add my 2 cents in about the procurement and passport, because as you know, I was a user of that for 12 plus years, and it is a pain point. I know it's better than HHS Accelerator, but again, to the point that you made, it's not the main root cause of the issue. It really is looking into procurement policies and laws that have been in place. And this is actually where I think, just my 2 cents, AI technology can be of a good opportunity and used to create more jobs, as well as increase some of our inefficiencies. And I've seen, we should have an offline conversation, but I've been talking to some groups also that have done this in other municipalities across the country. So I wonder if there's lessons learned there that we can also figure out from them.
I don't know if anyone's nailed this, but we're so unique as such a large municipality, but I would love to work with you. You know this inside and out, for better or for worse.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, Councilmember Ressler, followed by Councilmember Maloney.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair Lee, and good to see you, Mr. Controller. I'll just begin by noting, I think that one of the challenges we had in the last 4 years, and frankly before, was that there was significant discrepancy on what were the revenue estimates, what were the real costs that we're facing as a city, and you came out of the gate in your first days in office releasing updated assessments that I think were really helpful, and then kind of shockingly the mayor came out and basically agreed with you. Yeah. And so that forthright, frank, accurate accounting of the facts allows us all to have an adult conversation about how we're going to actually manage this gap and sustainably fund the vital services that we all are committed to moving forward. So I want to commend you and your team, and also commend the mayor and his team for being honest about our financial outlook. I remember Eric Adams, it felt like he was having a press conference every other week celebrating however many jobs existed in New York City. And yet, when we look back at 2025, as you noted in your testimony, it was not a good year for our local economy when it comes to jobs. In a previous life, I ran the New York City Employment and Training coalition of 200 workforce development organizations, union training funds, community college, adult education programs. We need to be training and connecting New Yorkers to high-quality employment opportunities, and yet, with the exception of home health aides, essentially, healthcare-related positions on the low end, which netted 70,000 additional jobs, 71,000 additional jobs last year, we otherwise, as you noted in your testimony, lost 38,000 jobs. Jobs in construction, jobs in transit, jobs in every sector you can imagine, jobs that we need. Can you help us explain what's going on in the local economy? How concerned are you about this contraction in employment, and what we should be doing about it?
Thank you so much, Councilmember, for all those comments. This is a major trend that we are not talking enough about. But if you talk to a young person in their 20s in New York City who's just got out of college, they are well aware that we are essentially in a low hire, no hire economy. This is a national problem. I think for a variety of reasons it's hitting New York particularly hard. But just to emphasize, it's even in finance where we lost jobs last year. Outside of the category of home health care aides, we had 38,000 jobs lost in New York City. Economists are not entirely sure the reasons. Some overhang from COVID and maybe some overhiring there. There's no doubt that all the harm done by the president's crazy tariff policy, also his draconian immigration policy, has an impact on employment and the economy that's underappreciated. For sure. And then there's the question of AI impact. And it seems to me that we are probably seeing the earliest signs there, although the data are not quite solid. But if you look at the types of jobs that We're seeing less hiring. It is entry-level white-collar jobs where we understand AI could be changing productivity. I'm worried that this will accelerate and that we as a city are doing virtually nothing to prepare for it. And your background in workforce development, your alarms, I'm sure the alarms are going off in your head. How do we prepare people for the jobs that will exist if we're seeing a shifting in the landscape? How do we support people who might lose their jobs? All of these remain out there. This is a trend we are not focusing enough. Yeah. One last point. We do need to be mindful of what we're losing to other parts of the country. It's great that JP Morgan just spent $3 billion to build a tower on Park Avenue. They have more employees in Texas than they have in New York. And we want to make sure that if it's a tough environment nationally, that New York is a winner here, and that we grow, that we don't lose jobs to other parts of the country, that this is a place that companies want to hire and invest and grow. And I think we all have to up our game on that.
Yeah, I really appreciate those points. You know, when we're losing jobs in everything from construction to hospitality, from financial services to transportation utilities, we've got a problem, and I agree with you. I appreciate it. I was also pleased, in addition to the JP Morgan Tower, American Express just announced a major new tower, which is good news for our economy as well. One more question in my last 12 seconds before Chair Lee kicks me off the stage. Savings. I'm hopeful that we're going to get some more revenue out of our friends in Albany, but in all likelihood, it's not going to fill, whether it's the $5 billion gap that the mayor estimates or the $7 billion gap that you estimate. We do need to identify some efficiencies. The mayor's target's 1.5% this year, 2.5% next year, probably not enough. No. Could you give us any specifics of where you think we have opportunities for consequential savings, areas where there was, you know, misspending or waste in the Adams administration, opportunities where you think we can achieve some greater efficiencies?
Look, it's very common for candidates to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse when they're running. That's our answer to how we're going to save money. And in the real world, it's a little more elusive, I want to be honest. And the next level of efficiency savings are going to be harder than what the mayor's put on the table, because there's no vacancies that you can book. You're going to be impacting agencies in a more serious way. It's going to be harder, probably unavoidable. I think there is huge potential in upping our technology game here to find ways to do more on limited budgets. We largely have a city government with technology that's stuck in the 1990s. There's a shocking amount that's still done with paper and pen. I'm not exaggerating, actual paper and pen processes. And so I think that accelerating the pace at which we can modernize government will help us. This gets to the procurement question, because you can't do that if you have a 3-year timeline. So we've also got to solve some of these procurement problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we had Passport, we had Vendex, and nobody wants to go back to that. So I think there are improvements we can make to Passport that are being released in October. Happy to continue the conversation with you all around procurement reform and making sure that we pay the nonprofits the $2.3 billion they are owed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member.
Great, thank you. And next we have Councilmember Maloney, followed by Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you, Comptroller, for being here and for already showcasing 2 different languages of your many. I want to thank you for your testimony and reinforce that in a time when affordability is at the top of the conversation, property taxes is not the answer to our budget problems, and reinforce that it's not the time to drain down a rainy day fund and use these other financial tools that really just pass the buck and push the problem down the pike. The point on state aid was mentioned prior, that we have unfunded state mandates, and also the stat that we contribute 55% and only get 41% back while we're being asked to serve these additional needs are all areas I care about. I wanted to go back to the conversation you were having about jobs, and those changes, are those relative to the national average? Are we seeing differences here in New York City?
This is a national trend.
Yeah.
We've had a very bad year nationally on job creation. I think we are pretty close, but Executive Deputy, would you like to offer any more color on that?
The trends that we're seeing in the city are, mirrored in what's happening in the United States as a whole. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And as you look at revenue streams, we were saying you're overly optimistic in some of the administration's projections. Are there any particular industries or revenue streams that are extra concerning?
Look, we are very dependent on the financial service sector, and it's a sector that goes up and down. Property tax is pretty stable, and Wall Street can have a great year or a bad year. And so there's a lot riding on what you think will happen to the stock market next year, and to earnings next year, and to bonuses next year, which just in this few months of bonus season, we have so much riding on it. We had a great bonus season this year. We had the best ever. The mayor assumes that we have a similar year next year, that we continue what has been a very strong 24, 2025 into 2026. And that is entirely possible, and I am rooting for that. But I see a little bit of uncertainty ahead as well, and I talked about this in my opening testimony. I think it's a little more prudent to be cautious on that. And so we came in at a slightly lower revenue projection, and mostly that is due to an assessment of the trajectory of the financial industry.
Thank you. And what is the role of the city, or what can the city be doing to help ensure that that sector is successful here?
Thank you for asking that question, because if we are relying on success in the financial industry to make our budget balance, then we should be asking ourselves, what can we do to help make that happen? And look, I think this is a very big conversation. It has to do in part with the affordability agenda, so that company feels that they can locate here and their staff can afford to live here. It has to do with business climate and the amorphous sense that this is a place that people feel they'll be welcomed. And we have a balancing act here, because we want to fight for workers and we want to fight for consumers. We have laws that have to be enforced, but we also want to grow the workforce, and we want business to feel they can grow here. So we've got to speak to both sides of that. I'm not sure we're doing that adequately right now, but you made the key point. If our budget relies on a growing Wall Street and a growing financial sector, then we better make sure that it continues to grow in New York City.
Thank you. Shifting back to city FEPS, we heard before about how the projections are to grow up to $2.6 billion. What are some of the key drivers that are leading to that increase and the unpredictability?
Well, look, the City Council, for very good reasons, changed the rules of the program. For example, you used to have to go to a homeless shelter and wait 90 days before you could apply to city FEPS. That was a barrier. And the City Council, for very good reasons, said, no, what, get there, start the application process when you get there, because we would rather get you out of the shelter more quickly. That, understandably, increased the pace of growth in the program, right? You made it easier to apply. There's an expansion that's not tied up in court that would allow people to apply while still in their homes, while they still have a lease. And there's a good reason for that, because the logic was, I don't want you to become homeless in the first place. How about we solve this problem first? But you can see why that opens it up to a large number of families and individuals, and that it would add a lot to the growth. So that's why I keep saying these are tough decisions, because this is life-changing for families who need it. I just do want to say very quickly on this, the solution to housing affordability in New York City is actually building more housing and more affordable housing. Vouchers are a Band-Aid,
Right.
and they're a one-shot that can help people when they need it, but they are not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is we need to build 500,000 more units of housing in New York City.
My last question, which I'll reframe as a statement, was from the prior testimony, which talked about how the city may not have the supply to absorb that demand, and was curious on your thoughts on that, but I can yield back to the chair as well.
Well, look, I'll just say very quickly, yeah, look, if you have a voucher, this is great, but if you don't have a voucher and you're a tenant who's struggling, you're now competing for homes with someone who has a voucher. And that's tough. This is why this is not the ideal long-term solution. It is important to prevent a given family entering homelessness. But we have 3 million households in New York City. We have 2 million tenants. Over half of our renters are severely rent burdens. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling. And we have 65,000 voucher families right now. So clearly we have to do more to build the housing that people need, so they're not fighting over vouchers and not competing with each other for scarce apartments.
Thank you very much.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember Brewer, followed by Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. You talked about the Carter Connor cases, and I'm certainly very aware of them. And you mentioned, as we all did, and we said to the IBO, more schools mean less money going towards the private schools. So do you, I don't know if it's IBO or you to do that kind of analysis. I don't think DOE is going to do it. And it is absolutely the right place to go. So I didn't know how you are looking at that, if at all. Just
Well, we certainly are. But I have to say that Chancellor Samuels, who you and I worked closely with together in
Very
District
well.
3, council member, took on some tough school mergers.
I'm aware.
And I know that he is thinking about doing this citywide. That's my impression. I'll let him speak. But I actually think that the DOE is quite aware of this dynamic and trying to figure out how to address it. But we're also doing the analysis here. And it's just an unavoidable outgrowth of reducing enrollment, that there are going to be some schools that drop below critical level. There's some that have below 150 students even, and I think some below 125. These numbers are really not defensible.
Yeah, I know. I'm very aware of the school merger issue. I'm talking about trying to get IEP slots.
Oh, forgive me.
Yeah, it's okay. Into the mergers I know well, and I agree with you. But the issue of trying to get slots for the IEP students so they're not going to Winston and everywhere else.
We're pushing for this.
I was wondering, yeah. 'cause
And actually, I know the mayor has mentioned this himself.
Yes.
So I can only assume DOE is working on it.
Okay.
But I just say we got to pick up the pace because
Yes, we
the
do.
alternative is not working.
That's what I'm saying. We all need to pick up the pace,
Yes.
and with all due respect, everybody, it has been talked about for the last 30 years. So I think we need to do it. Number 2 is Rikers. We all know that new borough supposedly coming. But right now, as you know, correction has the challenges of utilizing capital funding for projects that would normally be eligible, but because of the impending closure, you don't meet the Directive 10, which I know only too well, that 5-year issue.
Yeah.
So one issue that comes up constantly, and I've talked to the commissioner about it, is the cell doors are broken, $38 million to fix them. But I don't think they fit into Directive 10. And I don't know how you would play a role in that. I know you have to sign off on the waiver, and I'm just wondering where that's at. That means the doors are broken, correction officers are upset, et cetera, so are persons who want to be safe who are detainees. How are we looking at that issue?
Yes. So we do establish this directive that determines the parameters for capital eligibility, but it is set by generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. And so we are not able to adjust the 5-year timeline. And we've been in consultation with OMB on this. This is a major challenge. If either of my colleagues here want to correct
Who would grant the waiver if there is a waiver to be granted? Would that be OMB or you?
I don't think there is. I don't think it's possible because of the way the bond market works. But Executive Deputy, would you like to? Yes. Okay.
So we don't give waivers on Directive 10, but if there is a certificate to proceed or a determination from OMB regarding this particular with this particular submission from DOC, we'd be happy to review and see what that determination is, and then discuss with OMB as well. This is a matter of what is the minimum, life of these assets, and if Rikers is supposed to be closed. Right, before 5 years.
I'm just concerned because it's a real life and death issue.
100% agree with
it's not like putting new wallpaper up or something.
It sounds like there are two issues here. What the actual work is, whether it's maintenance of capital work, and then there is the time span. So both of those things we'd be happy to look at, but this is you understand this is a joint endeavor and eligibility determination with OMB as well.
I will push on both. Insurance, we all know about insurance rates going up. Does the city also have this as an issue? Because obviously housing, cars, et cetera, the whole discussion that obviously the governor is talking about it, et cetera. So I didn't know if that comes into what should we be doing about our insurance costs? Is that something that is brought up at all in your thinking? We're all looking for every place possible to save money.
Good for you for focusing on this. And I am actually not sure if we've done that analysis, but Deputy Comptroller, do you have thoughts on that?
I believe the city is largely self-insured, certainly for health and hospitals, for example, for malpractice, the city is self-insured.
So there'd be no savings
I
whatsoever
can't
in
speak to
insurance?
every category, I don't know if you know, Francesco, but certainly for healthcare, I can say the city is self-insured.
Okay, so all right, so there's no savings at all, is what you're saying. That's interesting, okay. Consultant contracts is, again, it's a buzzword, and it could mean, you need consulting contracts in some cases, but is this something that you
Yes.
look at generally? Obviously, not everyone, I know DOE has many too many, as an example, but how do we look at this, sort of fuzzy project in some way?
Councilmember, this is actually one category of very few that we think we could achieve some of the savings over what the mayor has proposed.
Yeah,
So I appreciate you identifying that. I don't know if we've pegged a number on it. Have we?
But
we
you're
did
working on it.
But we did, yes, and we did identify this as one category where we actually think we could get the cost down below what the mayor has projected.
Okay, and then just finally, AI, that's something that is on everybody's mind. Or do you have some number as to how it might or might not impact savings?
Savings?
Yes.
Do you mean by making government more efficient?
I do. Just start with the
well,
police
look,
department, and
you've
you go to the police department, you're just trying to get your car insurance because somebody busted the window, and out comes the paper and the pencil.
Exactly. Look, you've been beating the drum on technology for a long time, and we still have a long way to go. I think we're farther behind than ever because of how fast AI is moving. I couldn't put a number on what it will save, but I think the opportunities are vast. Look, there is risk and peril here too,
Yes.
for safety
Yes.
and bias and more. We got to
Absolutely.
put all that on the table.
Yes.
But we have very complicated systems in New York City government that are run on technology from the 80s.
Yes,
Our payroll system
yes,
is run on mainframes from the 80s.
correct.
And the cost
Got to
and
find a
complexity
Colbolt
of
guy
that-
somewhere.
What's that?
You got to find a Colbolt guy somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so it's something that everybody's looking at, is what you're
Yes.
saying. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there was actually a situation in Chicago where they actually used AI and technology to actually track and make more efficient PD over time. So it was a really interesting case, which I'll tell you about later. But yes. Okay, sorry, Deputy Speaker.
No problem, thank you. Hi.
Hello, Deputy Speaker.
Okay, I have a few questions. The first questions are on the MWBE report. So as of January, your office issued the annual report on MWBE procurement, and you found that MWBEs only account for 5% of the citywide procurement value, and that only 8% of the value of contracts subject to MWBE participation goals were registered to MWBEs. Why did your MWBE report show such low numbers for the amount of city contract dollars going towards MWBE certified firms?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. We actually now have a legal obligation in my office because the City Council passed a bill that requires us every year by January 31st to do a full report on MWBEs and how good our contracting is. It only covers mayoral agencies. So I just want to put that on the table. So Health and Hospitals isn't covered, Knights is not covered, EDC is not covered. It also only covers what's in Passport. And there's a problem with getting subcontractors registered into Passport. So there's some undercounting there. But having said that, I think the numbers are pretty stark, and they should serve as a wake-up call to us. And it's very important to distinguish the number of contracts and the dollar value of contracts. If you only look at the number of contracts, the picture is a lot better. We had about 250,000 contracts and purchase orders last year and about 50,000 going to certified firms. So that's about 25%, but that's not dollar value. And the MWBE firms are getting much smaller contracts. The average contract for firms that are not certified is about 3.7 million. The average contract for certified MWBEs is only 750,000. So you have to focus on the money. And when you do, you get a very disappointing number. That's why we came out at 5%. And look, our job is to put that out there so we can rally and do better. And if you want, I can talk about ideas we can do that. But the numbers are pretty stark, and that should really upset all of us.
Thank you. Yes, I would love to talk to you about how we can improve the numbers
Yes.
going forward. So I won't ask you your thoughts now,
Oh.
but I will. I would love to talk to you about that. But I will just ask a random question I thought about, because I know the state requires 30% MWBE contracting on all like government contracts. So like, is the city not in compliance of the state law that requires 30%?
Well, I think we're governed by city council laws.
Okay.
And I believe those are targets. And
So
again,
there's no, which is the problem, right? Because there's no real penalties if
Yes.
contractors don't meet, which I thought the city was also going by 30%. I thought they adopted the state.
yes, but I believe it's a target.
Okay,
And one of the reasons why we did the report, and probably why the council wanted to put it into law, is we go agency by agency. So you can look at every single agency and you can compare who's performing well and who's not. And there is a shockingly wide range of performance in MWBE contracting. So a little bit of public exposure here and sunlight will help.
okay, yes. I held a roundtable with the former comptroller to talk about MWBE related issues. So I would love, again, to follow up with you on this, because
absolutely.
I don't think we've been talking about it enough as a city, because there's been so many advancements in terms of legislation, but the actual impact, I don't really see significant impact. So I would love to talk to you about that. Okay, a few other questions. Can you just walk me through in general the methodology your office uses to analyze the mayor's prelim, like any fiscal indicators or benchmarks you have?
And how we evaluated the mayor's plan? Look,
Yes.
the biggest effort we put into was really examining their revenue projections. And we have a 150-page report that's covering that, and also the expense side. This is available online. And we don't take the mayor's projections for granted. We want to interrogate it, and we came up with some lower numbers that in total mean about 1.8 billion less that we project in revenue in this fiscal year and the one ahead, and that's one more challenge for us to overcome right now.
Okay, does the comptroller's office currently conduct any equity analysis of the city budget, specifically examples of how spending impacts different communities by race, income, or geographical location?
Well, the office has done many individual reports looking at that for given programs and agencies, but there's not the kind of broad-based equity impact requirement that such as there is now for rezonings. But that's something that I would love to work with you much more on.
Okay, and so I'm sure you'll have a similar answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway
Please
for
do.
the record, which is, are there any data sets or indicators that your office relies on to measure budget allocations, to measure whether or not budget allocations are equitably distributed across neighborhoods?
Geographically, you mean?
Yes.
Look, I don't know if we've done a good geographic analysis on the budget, but have we? No. But we would love to, and we're going to partner with you, Deputy Speaker.
Yes, I look forward to working with
Okay.
your office, because fortunately or unfortunately, I do plan to give you guys more work so you can
We
properly
love that.
analyze the budget for equity. It is really like the dying thing in my last 4 years, because New York City is so significantly behind on how we analyze our budget. I mean, the process itself doesn't even allow us to really analyze it in that way, particularly because of the units of appropriation issue. You can't even really see what's happening from agency to agency. So I do look forward to working with you and getting your feedback to empower and encourage and require you all to do more of a deep dive around budget equity.
Likewise, Deputy Speaker, thank you.
Nice, thank you. And next we have Councilmember Wong, followed by Councilmember Mealy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Comptroller
Councilmember, great to
Levine.
see you.
Nice to see you again. Yeah. Before my questions, I want to say that as a budget director of the former Councilman Robert Holden, I can sit here all afternoon to tell you the bugs and the usability issues of Passport. So
I feel your pain, Councilman.
yeah. So if you have your next meeting, I'll be glad to come and tell you
Thank you.
my experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. My first question is this: there are a lot of homeless shelters in my district, and what I noticed them is that they will fill them up to the seam and send a bill to the city every month. Here are the number of occupants, X number of residents, send us a check. Because of that payment model, I see very little incentive for them to get the homeless out of the system and into affordable housing. So my question to you is that, is it feasible for you to modify the contract so they could be paid only when someone is out of the system and into a real housing unit, only then that they will be paid based on the number of months they stay in the shelter? Would you something you would consider?
So I think there are a variety of performance metrics in the contracts, but I'm not sure if they're exactly like you described. Do you happen to know, Executive Director?
I mean, they are paid based on the number of people. They have to provide services and food, and so they do pay based on the number of people that are residing there. I do believe, I know they used to have performance incentives for achieving placement rates. I don't know the latest in terms
Right,
of...
but that is the framing. They're supposed to place people in permanent housing.
And I don't see that happening, because if they place, there's vacancies and then they get paid less, right? So there's no.
But I think there's always someone waiting to come and take that bed. But we will look into the state of those contracts. I'm all for having performance metrics. Look, we have a very wide range of the quality of service providers amongst our homeless agencies, and there needs to be accountability so that all of them become better, and having good metrics in the contract is obviously one way to do that.
Okay, yes, and I'll follow up with you on the shelters.
Please.
That I believe is just more interested in filling up than rather than placing the homeless into housing. So
Thank you.
Yeah, here's my second question. I still have time. Before we ask homeowners to pay more in taxes, do you believe the city has done enough to identify waste or control spending growth? And is there a comptroller report that I could read about it where you could identify waste or control spending growth? Thank you.
Well, Councilor Murlock, as you've heard me say, I don't think we should raise property taxes for a variety of reasons. And I do think that we can do more to find some savings and efficiencies in the budget and to do some hard work on reconfiguring some of the programs. That should be our priority. I'm committed to doing that work with you. If you're asking about a report from our office on waste, look, we audit every city agency, and that can uncover all manner of fraud and waste, and these are ongoing. We have many audits ongoing right now, actually. They take a while. They can take a year or two or more because there's such intense work involved. But I think you're referring to some sort of broader report on the state of waste.
Here are the programs that don't work, or here are the programs that yield very little results, and those fundings should be reallocated. That's the kind of report I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We shouldn't judge just by how much we spend. We should judge by what impact we get for the city and for New Yorkers. We don't do that enough. I agree. Sometimes we just fund a program and walk away, and we got to ask what's working. And you rightly proposed we need performance metrics in our homeless shelter system so people get placed. And I agree with you, and I'd like to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, I love performance metrics and being able to measure if something's working or not. And next we have Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi.
Good to see you, Controller.
Likewise, Councilmember.
I guess I have a couple of different questions, and since I was in and out, it's possible you've answered them already.
No problem.
But I'd like to start with NYCHA. I was wondering if your office has put forward any recommendations and or looked at PAC converted developments in terms of just general oversight.
Well, in the 2+ months I've been there, no. My predecessor, Comptroller Landra, did put out a report that was fairly critical. This is something that we're extremely interested in. It does appear that the current administration intends to continue, at least in one prominent case, in Chelsea Elliott Fulton houses. and that might indicate that they're open to it in other developments as well. So it's something we're going to be looking at closely. You know as much about public housing as anyone in New York City, because obviously having chaired the committee, and boy, we're not left with a lot of easy options here. And with a federal government that's turned its back on us, with a state government that helps some, but not enough relative to the 80 billion we need to invest in the capital of these buildings, we're going to have to look at creative solutions.
For sure.
And Rad Pact is one of them. But yeah, we need to keep it under scrutiny, especially now that we have a number of developments that have been running already for a couple of years, and we can look at how they're doing.
100%. You know, I think, excuse me, as you know, NYCHA currently has over 6,000 units sitting empty. Is your office, do you think you will be looking at that and the long-term impacts of a growing number of units that are empty amidst the housing crisis?
Yes, I am very worried about this.
Yep.
The turnaround time is getting longer and longer and longer between...
And the numbers are growing.
Yes, therefore, because it's taking longer, you're getting a bigger inventory, which I think is now approaching 7,000 units.
Yes.
In the middle of a housing crisis.
With 175,000 people on a waiting list.
Yes, so it's unacceptable. We are pushing on that. I'm not sure if that would work for the timeline of an audit, which tends to be slower, but I would like to join with you and the council to push very, very hard on that. We have got to get those apartments full. There's also been reporting that now some people are breaking into them and living there, which is a security issue. Of course, people are desperate, I get it, but this is not acceptable. We've got to get those apartments renovated and turned around faster and families in there as soon as possible.
Thank you. We'd love your help in making
You
sure
will
that
have it.
happens.
Yes.
Similarly, I think there has been, in terms of supportive housing, vacant supportive housing units is another deep concern where we understand there are thousands of supportive housing units empty in the middle of a housing crisis.
This is a different issue, also very problematic, but I don't think this is about a renovation challenge.
No, it's not. But
Yes, and it's not even, I think, about the nonprofits. I think this is the bureaucracy, which is too slow to get people identified and placed. And again, we're in the middle of a shortage on supportive units as well. This has to be sped up.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. In terms of just shifting a little bit, commercial vacancies, I see in my district a growing number of commercial vacancies. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions. We know the impacts of these vacancies are really profound, and we're hearing in Brooklyn that there's 21.8%. And so do you have any recommendations? Are you tracking that?
I'm very worried about this. When you have vacant storefronts, it saps life from a neighborhood. It's a public safety issue. It's a public health issue. There's so many secondary problems. We have very little data on this, which is why I was excited to hear you have such a precise number in your community. So thank you for doing that work. I would like to figure out a way to have a citywide data set to track this, which we don't currently have. Councilmember Brewer actually has done some good analysis in the Upper West Side on Broadway. I think it required councilmember interns going block by block. So I'm not sure if we can do that citywide. But I have some ideas using technology to build this out. If we can get a good number, we can track this, and it would help us focus attention on solving this problem.
Couldn't agree with you more, and certainly the impacts are innumerable, and certainly one of the main drivers is the rent is too damn high, and particularly in commercial context. Do you think commercial rent stabilization could help support that?
Maybe. I think it's more complicated than residential for a variety of reasons. I think we should be looking at it, though. But I think we have some underlying challenges that are beyond that. Competition from the internet probably being the biggest. Costs being a major factor, of utilities, of real estate taxes. Here we are talking about that. So look, for people who are complaining about retail storefronts, please don't order your toothbrush online. Go to a store in the neighborhood and buy from a local merchant.
Heard. Thank you. Thank you,
You got it.
Comptroller. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to go into a few more questions before we wrap it up. But going into the debt service savings, so in the past 10 fiscal years, the city has been able to identify at least 195 million in debt service savings annually, with average annual savings exceeding 300 million. However, this year, OMB has only identified 156 million in savings thus far. And for example, our staff believe that the interest assumptions used by OMB are a bit unrealistic, as projected interest rates are always higher than the actual rates, and right-sizing these rates would create savings, including variable rate debt costs, which would be felt immediately. So do you believe that there are additional savings to be had in the debt service budget? Because I know there's different...
I am going to pass it to Francesco. I just want to caution you here that I'm not so sure that this is going to be an easy pot of money to find, partly because rates are set by conditions beyond our control or by an event like a refinancing, and that we have decided that it would not be prudent to add more savings into our projections, but I'm going to have Francesco weigh in, who's more of an expert.
So the city has traditionally recognized those savings at the time when there are refundings, for instance. And the city, tends to set some assumptions that are that are a little more pessimistic than what it then realizes, right? That's always been a buffer for the city. We have a couple of refundings coming up, which are going to provide a few, which are going to provide resources. It is, how should I say, it is not an amount of money that it's large enough, and it is not an amount of money that it's current enough.
What's your estimate?
We can get back to you with
Okay.
with an estimate, and we'll speak with your staff. But this is not, it's sort of like taking risk in the future, right? To have savings possible, to already take savings in the future, where it's not going to change structurally the situation.
I mean, right, but well, I guess that's what I'm curious to hear about more, because, even when I was doing, again, much smaller scale, but my nonprofit's debt service budgeting every year, there usually are things that you can sort of find and dig into. So I just wanted to get a sense of if you could provide more details on the type of savings that have been found in the past, and then also what role, if any, your office does play in finding those savings within the comptroller's office.
Oh, is it me? So the Office of the Comptroller and the Office of Management and Budget, they work jointly on all of the debt issuances and identifying the bonds that need to be refunded to maximize the amount of refunding. What we do is we typically take the savings from the refundings and we pursue them aggressively, and we spread them over the financial plan. This has been long-standing policy that we've applied. And we realize the savings in the budget as we issue the bonds, and we get those savings in the financial plan.
And then moving over to the interest earnings. Our council finance team believes that the city historically under-forecast the interest earnings on its cash balances based on revenues generated so far. And we believe that there's more money that OMB can recognize here, and also in FY27 and in the out years, as interest rates are expected to stay relatively elevated. In addition, there are a number of off-book entities with their own cash balances that earn interest that we should account for when balancing the budget. And so, like the RHBT and the Hudson Yards Infrastructure Corporation, have you looked at interest earnings in the city's cash balance?
Every day. No, I'm not kidding. So we have, I'm sorry, Comptroller.
Well, let me just say big picture on that, then I'm going to pass it to you for the technical expertise. Look, this is all, we have what we call a short-term desk. This is money that needs to be incredibly liquid and has to be in very high-quality investments. And therefore, you're going to get a low interest rate. Right? That's the trade-off. You're not going to get very high interest rate on something that has to be liquid. You can't take on a lot of risk. And we have a whole team dedicated to our short-term desk in our Bureau of Asset Management. And I'm pretty confident that they're getting the right risk-return balance. So I would caution you that I don't think this is a big pot of savings to be achieved. And now I'm going to pass it off to you, Francesco.
Well, we have the treasurer for the city, I think, sitting all the way over there, and we work closely with them to do overnight investment of the city cash balances. Now, those are done by the Office of the Comptroller. We also invest the Retiree Health Benefit Trust balance, and that's based on investment guidelines that are set by OMB. But the fact that we do it, it means that OMB set guidelines that, you know, require us to invest in short-term assets, right? And so that's a conversation that, you know, needs to be had. If there is an opportunity to have higher interest on those, that's first we need to change the guidelines, and we wouldn't be able to do it, right? If it's not short-term, this is not something that, you know, we would do in-house at the Office of the Comptroller. HYIC it manages its bond proceeds and the interest on those, and the Comptroller has no role in that.
Are there steps the city could do to improve the revenue it generates on its cash balances?
The Department of Finance has a forecast of cash balances. OMB does. We do every quarter publish. There are a couple of things. One, they're very dependent on short-term interest rates. So during the pandemic, we had zero earnings and large cash balances. And now we have higher interest rate and therefore higher income, but a trend of shrinking cash balances, right? So the two things are sort of like going in opposing directions. And so it really will depend for this year and the next, what we see with the expense trajectory and with the revenue trajectory, right? So that's going to be crucial to understand where our cash balance is going to go. But there is not a sense. We do offsets. We calculate offsets to the interest income in our report. So it's part of, you know, when we come out with a reestimate of the gap, that's part of it too. And we'd be glad to show you what our numbers are and, you know, their forecast of where the interest rates are going to be. So, you know, that's also another margin of error. You know, is the Fed going to tighten or loosen, and how fast, right?
Right. And I know that cash balances can be tough because it is so fluid and it is moving around so quickly, but that definitely whatever we can do to try to see how to increase that would be great. And of course, Comptroller's Office, the big responsibility you all have with our pension funds is obviously a huge thing. So in terms of the pension annual returns, in fiscal 2025, the city's pension systems achieved a 10.3% aggregate net return on investments, significantly exceeding the 7% actuarial assumption. So can you please update the committee on the year-to-date returns for the city's pension system?
I want to answer that, but I have to update you on some very serious breaking news related to our topic today, which is Moody's has just issued a report, and they're revising their outlook for us, which is very unusual, from stable to negative. This is not a bond downgrade, but it's serious, and it should focus us on the challenge of these structural deficits that we've been speaking about. They cited this in their analysis. I want to say what I said earlier, that our bond ratings are all stable, and we expect that to continue for the near future. We have a bond sale next week that we expect to go forward normally, but I do want you and us to absorb what just happened. This is the first time since the pandemic that Moody's has had a negative revision in its outlook for us, and it's a reminder of the scale of the challenges ahead of us.
Sorry, just really quickly on that point. So how's that going to impact future borrowing?
I don't think it has an immediate impact. It doesn't change our bond rating, but this can sometimes be a precursor to a bond downgrade. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be, but I think that should be considered a greater possibility in the months ahead. Moody's cited our our plan to take money out of our reserve fund during an otherwise strong economy. As I think I mentioned earlier, this generally serves as a warning sign to rating agencies. But again, a word of confidence here. We have not had our actual rating changed, and we don't think that's imminent, and we don't expect that this will undermine our scheduled sale next week or in the near future, which we do fully expect to be successful. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, we need to be in the market, rain or shine, right? Because of the size of our capital plan, and we need to issue billions of dollars every month. And this is one of the considerations that the market will take into account. And we will see, where the interest rates are going to be and the cost of borrowing. Certainly, it's not a downgrade. Right? But it's a negative outlook, meaning that that Moody's identified a structural spending problem. That's where the emphasis is. And if that is addressed in a similarly structural fashion, then the outlook could go back to stable. Right, so this is not a final determination, but certainly puts the accent on a further light.
No, it's definitely something we need to look out for. And I think to reiterate the point, I think that's why on the council side we were very cautious or hesitant to say that we're very much against drawing down on the rainy day funds for this exact reason, because we were afraid that potentially this could have an impact on exactly what you're mentioning. And so hopefully we're able to figure out a way to, dig a little deeper into the budget to figure out where there are cost savings, because I think that's a big concern that we've had from the beginning with the rainy day fund drawdown. So, okay, good to know.
Do you want me to speak on the pensions?
Oh my gosh,
Chair?
yes, sorry, yes. So going back to the pensions.
Because that's better news.
Yes.
Our pensions are in good shape. We have, at latest count, I believe, $316 billion in our 5 funds combined. And we have a much higher rate of funding than most other jurisdictions in America. We're currently up to about 90% fully funded, and we're on a path to get to 100% fully funded through our payment plan by 2033. This is good news. And workers, city workers and retirees should feel good hearing those numbers. We have a goal on the rate of return, and our goal is to get 7% as a long-term average. And we've been meeting that and beating it in recent years. Last year, I believe, we hit 10.3%, and this year, I believe we're at 8.3%, so we're down a little bit because the market hasn't performed as well so far, but even still, we're above our benchmark. Really, though, the average retiree shouldn't even get so caught up in those numbers that I say, because we are built for the long term. We are perpetual investors. We are universal investors. We are not day traders. And we have built a very, very robust, diverse portfolio that does not live and die by the price of oil going up and down one day across all kinds of assets. Private assets, public assets, equity, debt in America, in countries around the world. And I'm really proud of our team, and I feel good about the state of our pensions today.
No, thank you for that, and I'm sure the rest of us are also very thankful for that. So, and I know you touched upon this earlier, but if you could just talk a little bit more about how the current economic challenges, including possibly Iran war, mean for the health of the city's pension funds. And I know that this is obviously a long-term game, as you mentioned, and how may these affect returns in the current year? Hopefully, you said it's 8.3 or 8.6?
8.3.
8.3, okay.
So far this year.
So far. And then, so how do these potential things, how do you foresee it potentially impacting?
Look, I care a lot about the economic impact of the war for New York City because of its pumping up fuel costs and inflation more broadly, and also a variety of other critical supplies. 30% of the world's fertilizer goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and this is going to be a blow to the U.S. economy. We're already feeling it, arguably, and therefore a blow to New York City's economy. Having said that, the pension is a much longer view, and while obviously we monitor day-to-day, hour-by-hour developments in the markets, we're somewhat protected from that kind of fluctuation because of how diverse and broad our asset base is. So I would not want a retiree sitting at home seeing oil price spiking because of the war in Iran and worrying about their pension. Really, they're protected from that kind of day-to-day impact.
And that's good. No, thank you for saying that on the record too, because I think, as you mentioned, it is a longer-term game, so
Yeah.
it's good news for them. And on cash balances, so I know we discussed this a little bit before, but on November 28th, 2025, the city's unrestricted cash balance reached a seasonal low of $3 billion compared to $4.6 billion in FY25 and $5.2 billion in FY24. And while these lower balances are temporary, and typically the balances rebound with large inflows of revenue, they're still a little concerning. And apparently these cash balances are not even as large as what we understand as the balances included in the assets for the rainy day fund. And so the mayor's prelim plan currently includes the use of nearly $1 billion of resources from the RDF to help balance the budget. So what is your benchmark for unrestricted cash balances being of concern?
Okay, so I think the unrestricted cash balance and the RDF and the healthcare benefit trust are different questions, correct?
The retiree health benefit trust certainly is not in our cash balance.
Yeah.
The rainy day fund is.
Right. So the retiree health benefits trusts, which I want to remind council members what that is because I'm not sure people understand. That is to essentially have assets squirreled away for the health care that we're going to provide retirees in the years ahead. And that's a very large obligation.
Yep.
That is probably $100 billion that we have currently $5 billion in this fund for. Now, we're not legally obligated. It's not like the pension. This is not subject to state law. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it's not exactly a slush fund. And it's why we should be a little bit cautious if we're drawing it down because it does serve another purpose. I'm going to refer to you, Francesco, on the other cash funds.
So the city has not borrowed on a short-term basis for decades now. We certainly looked at the cash balance, particularly at the beginning of December when it hits a low point, very closely, and we work collaboratively with OMB as well to monitor it and to take measures that would that avoid having to borrow short-term. Right before COVID, our balance would go to about $1 billion, sometimes less at the beginning of December. That kept us nervous. Let me put it that way. You're right. The Revenue Stabilization Fund is just a general fund balance that's left over at the end of the fiscal year. Therefore, that amount of money is part of our cash balances now. I will make a couple of observations. First, it is using the rainy day fund at the end of the fiscal year. It's not like taking a check out of it all at once, right? What determines the cash balance is not the accrual process and how you allocate the expenses and the revenue to the fiscal year, but when you actually pay and receive the money. So what we're seeing is that if your expenses are growing faster, right, than your revenues, which is the situation that we find ourselves in, we have a narrower and narrower cash balance, and that we can do a lot of things. We can try to apply bond proceeds earlier than we would otherwise have in order to shore up the cash, towards the beginning of December, and we can have transfers for certain entities to the city earlier in the fiscal year, so that we achieve the same, outcome. But certainly, that $1 billion it's as low as we are comfortable it getting. Let me put it that way.
And is it going to impact the liquidity problems if it gets to approximately $1 billion? Or if $1 billion is withdrawn, sorry. Yeah.
We're gonna have if sure. The city is spending more than it receives, the cash balance is going to be lower, right? No matter what, right? Whether we and so over time the average cash balance will be lower as if we dipped into the rainy day fund. That if we were 3 billion last year, maybe eventually we're going to be at 2 billion, right? We would want to avoid going to below the $1 billion that
Right.
makes us nervous, plus whatever is left over in the revenue stabilization fund. But we're also, that gives us, let me put it this way, that gives us a little bit of buffer if we wanted to temporarily go below 2 billion.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. And Councilmember Carr, if you wanted to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair. Comptroller, always good to see you.
Councilmember, great to see you.
Likewise. I want to talk a little bit about the two topics I brought up with IBO earlier today, and in particular the relationship between NYPD headcount and the overtime budget, which I know you've talked about previously. So, when you joined this council in 2014, the NYPD headcount was over 35,000. Now we struggle to stay above 33. And in that first year, I remember the council pushing for civilianization so that more able-bodied officers can get redeployed out of desk jobs and out into the streets. The following year, 1,300 new officers were hired as part of that budget push, and the notion was that we would achieve savings for those hires through overtime reductions. So, given that we're only saving allegedly $17.8 million this year for canceling the phase-in of the 5,000 new officers that the mayor ended earlier this year, are we not being penny-wise, pound-foolish when we have an OT budget for this fiscal year that's approaching $900 million?
Well, we've also been, first off, let me say I appreciate your question on this, and I know how much you care about public safety, and I know how much your borough and your district supports law enforcement, so you're asking very important questions. And yes, we certainly got into a bad spiral where we were understaffed, and we ended up covering that with extra overtime, which in some cases was demoralizing for the staff, particularly younger members.
Definitely.
Who have families at home and want to be able to see them. And that probably accelerated resignations, which only made the reliance on overtime worse. So in the last year or so, we've started to get the cycle going in the right direction because we have had, under Commissioner Tisch, some large academy classes. And so I think we are getting closer to the budgeted head count. I don't know if we're quite there. And I think that should help us. Having said that, we actually think that the mayor, it's one of the few categories where we think the mayor's proposal is actually underestimating expenses, wasn't overtime, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is clearly still an issue. And it's a reminder that we do need to, as quickly as possible, get to full head count. That may require moving through some additional academy classes soon, which I would certainly support. Do you have anything to add on that, Krista? Okay.
No, that's great to hear, because I think, we hear about the hemorrhaging of existing officers. Retention's very difficult even as new hiring continues. And I hear from folks in the precinct about how exhausted they are with the overtime, because everyone loves overtime, but they hate mandatory overtime, right? And so I think that's a point well said, and I'm glad that we have an area of cooperation there. I also mentioned earlier when the folks at IBO were here about the burden that our combined tax rate has here, in particular the driving out of taxable wealth from our city. And the Citizens Budget Commission report indicated that our share of the nation's millionaires plummeted 31% 2010 to 2022, and if we had kept our tax levels at 2010 levels, we would have actually taken in $13 billion more in personal income tax in 2022. So what's your perception of that issue as folks are pushing for increases in the personal income tax and other tax rates at the state level?
This is a very big, high-stakes question. And we had a little bit of an experiment in 2021 when the income tax rates were raised in New York. And both sides have used that experience to make their case. On the one hand, it's true that the number of millionaires and high-income people actually has gone up since then. But if you look at the national picture, it's gone up nationally because we've had a good economy, and New York City's share of that has grown more slowly than states like Texas and Florida, which is what the IBO report pointed out. And so I guess I'd say we have to be very careful that, that we remain competitive with other parts of the country. And I'm also aware that we have some tough fiscal challenges as well. And I also believe in progressive taxation. I think the wealthy should pay more in a time of great inequality. So I'm personally balancing all of those considerations, and I know the council is as well, but you're putting one of them on the table, which is if people leave New York City, that is a loss for everybody. And in a mobile society, we can't rule that out. We need to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you,
you.
Chair.
Thank you. I believe, does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I believe that this portion is over. And I just want to say I appreciate you not only as a colleague, friend, but also in this role as comptroller, because we definitely do need to figure out how we're going to find more savings and balance the budget. But also to your point earlier, I think it's not just with the schools, but also with healthcare or anything else, is that sometimes, if you do invest a bit more upfront, it will save in, down the line the city and state dollars. And so appreciate that perspective.
Grateful for your leadership,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. This was a wonderful hearing. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.